Welcome back to Academic Writing 102. In the previous lessons, we've looked at the entire essay, its structure, and all of its parts to make the whole essay. The introduction, the body, and the conclusion. Now we're going to start looking at those individual parts and deconstructing those. So first we're going to look at the introduction. And the first part of the introduction we're going to look at is the hook. The hook is the part of the essay that grabs your reader or hooks your reader's attention. Now, there are different ways to do a hook. So by the end of this lesson, we're going to understand what a hook is, and we're going to understand how to use one type of hook known as the anecdote, or a small story. Before we begin that though, I have a story to tell of my own. So when I was a kid growing up, I was quite the tomboy. I loved to play in the dirt and play with bugs, and I loved fishing. When I was about 16 years old, I decided to go fishing one day. We lived on the beach, and in this compound on the beach, there was quite a long pier that led out into the sea. So I decided to go out on the end of this pier to go fishing. I had decided that if I was out far enough on the pier, I could catch some barracuda. I had heard from another friend there were barracuda there. So off I went with my rod and my tackle box, and I got ready at the end of the pier to start fishing. It was a beautiful day. The sun was shining, the water was mostly calm, and the pier was empty. I was there all by myself. So at the front of the pier, it's wide open to the sea. At the back of the pier, there's a railing, I guess to keep you from falling off. So I got my line ready, my rod ready, and I began to cast it out to the sea. As I did that, it got stuck. Nothing happened. And I pulled a little bit more, and then suddenly I said, let me turn around and see what's happening. And before I knew it, I'd caught the biggest fish of all, and the hook was in my lip. Unbeknownst to me, my line had gotten tangled in the railing behind me. And when I turned around, the line was swinging around that railing, and the hook went straight through my lip. Well, now I was in a real fix. What was I supposed to do? I was caught on the railing with a hook in my mouth. My tackle box was on the other side of the pier. And then suddenly, I saw this little 9-year-old boy come running down the pier. He took one look at me and he said, "Oh my God, you've got a hook in your mouth." I said, "Yeah." I said, "Do you think you can help me?" He said, "Okay." I said, "Go to that box over there. There's a knife in there. Get the knife out and bring it to me so I can cut myself free." Well, he did that. I cut myself free. My lip hurt a lot, but it didn't hurt as bad as I expected it to. So I packed up everything and we walked back to the end of the pier. He kept asking me, "What are you going to do? Does it hurt? How come there's no blood?" Really, there wasn't that much blood. I told him, I said, "I'm going to have to just go to the doctor and get it taken out." So he went back to his house and I went home and went off to the doctor. Everything went fine. The doctor got my hook out, gave me some Tylenol and some kind of wonderful numbing cream and sent me home. Once I got home, I remembered I was supposed to babysit that night. And I couldn't call. It was already about 5:30 in the evening. So I said, I'm just going to have to go. So off I went to my babysitting job. Rang the doorbell. The mother came to the door. "What has happened to you? What happened to your mouth?" I said, "It's a long story." I said, "But I got a hook caught in my mouth fishing." She said, "You don't have to tell me a thing." She said, "My son has already told me the whole story." I looked at her, and suddenly a little 9-year-old boy came up from behind her, and he was the boy from the pier. He took one look at me, and he said, "Are you my babysitter?" I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "Awesome, I've got Hook Girl for my babysitter." And then he ran off to his room. Needless to say, I had made quite an impression. And I didn't have much trouble with that babysitting job. Most 9-year-old boys won't mess with someone who's had a hook in their mouth. So, why did I tell you this story? What are you thinking right now? Have I gotten your attention? What kind of impression have I made on you with my story? How are you thinking about what's going to come next? Are you excited to hear the rest? So what I have just presented to you is what's known as a hook. In this type of hook, I've told you a small story known as an anecdote. Now, an anecdote gives you several options. Of course, there are many ways to introduce an introduction with a hook. We'll deal with those later. But right now, we're looking at the anecdote. So, what does that anecdote, that type of device, do? First of all, it sets the scene. So you have the ability to catch your reader's attention by giving them something visual, giving something with a bit of drama. Also, you can use current events, relevant details. You can set the mood, the tone of what you're going to say. It also gives you a lot of flexibility, because with other devices, like quotes or declarative statements, for example, you have one thing to work with. But this, you can shape it to give just enough information to tease your reader, to get them drawn in. This gives you license to even make up a story if you don't have one on hand. Use your creativity. So that's the purpose of a hook. Now, I have an example to give you. The first example is an essay written by a student that does not have an anecdote. The second one is the same example, but with an anecdote added. Let's see the difference. So, here's the first one, and it begins just with a declarative statement. Now, the topic of this essay is hate crimes. Hate crimes are murders or unjust actions towards individuals because of the offender's biased opinions about uncontrolled factors like race, religion, ethnicity, or sexuality. Currently in the United States, there are 6,266 offenders of hate crimes known to the FBI and 8,819 victims. As each new hate crime is reported, their impact further unravels the fabric of our democracy, leaving only the threads of freedom and mistrust for authority, injustice, and more hate. So that's a pretty powerful beginning. But let's see what happens when we add an anecdote. I watched in horror as George Floyd lay prone on the ground behind a police car, with a policeman's knee on his neck and onlookers shouting at the police. As George Floyd pleaded helplessly for a chance to breathe, the policeman pushed his knee down harder on George Floyd's neck, killing him. Like so many others before him, George Floyd was killed senselessly in front of the world by an officer of the law. Their lives should have been spared, but their murderer's hate towards them ended their lives unfairly. Hate crimes are murders or unjust actions towards individuals because of, and it continues the same way the other essay did, and goes into the thesis. Now, which one is better? Which essay do you want to read? Yeah, I think the one with the anecdote. So that is the purpose of an anecdote. That is how it's used in writing to introduce a topic. Now, for your assignment, you're going to be given 4 different topics and you have to produce your own anecdote. You can do that in writing or you can introduce it in a video. Also, I have a discussion forum going on anecdotes, so you can ask any other questions that you may have. That ends our discussion on hooks that are anecdotes. Next time, we'll look at different types of hooks we can use, and we'll talk about those and their effectiveness. Thank you. See you again next time.